Number 14 on this list was used by ancient physicians for thousands of years before modern medicine even existed. And one of these drinks has clinical research behind it that is stopping scientists cold. These are the most powerful drinks ever consumed by human beings, and every single one of them appears directly in the Bible. Today, we are counting down 20 biblical drinks that will heal you instantly. Let's get into it. Number 1. Water. This one opens the list for a reason, because before any herb, any pressed juice, or any fermented drink ever touched human lips, there was water. And in the biblical world, water was not taken for granted the way it is today, but was understood as a divine gift of survival that entire civilizations were built around. 2. Goat's milk. Goat's milk was one of the most consumed drinks in the entire biblical world. Modern nutritional science has found that goat's milk is easier for the human digestive system to process than cow's milk due to its smaller fat globules and different protein structure, with research published in the Journal of Dairy Science documenting its superior bioavailability of key minerals including calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium. 3. Pomegranate juice. Pomegranate juice was pressed and consumed across the ancient Near East for thousands of years, celebrated in the Song of Solomon, specifically by name as a drink worthy of the most intimate and sacred moments in biblical poetry. Modern science has identified pomegranate juice as one of the most antioxidant-dense beverages ever analyzed in a laboratory setting. 4. Grape juice. Grape juice in its freshly pressed unfermented form was consumed daily across biblical Israel by everyone from common laborers to temple priests, representing the first stage of the winemaking process. Modern research has identified freshly pressed grape juice as an extraordinarily rich source of resveratrol, quercetin, and a spectrum of polyphenolic compounds that researchers have linked to improved cardiovascular markers, reduced oxidative stress, and significant anti-inflammatory activity throughout the body. 5. Aloe Vera Juice. Aloe vera was a documented plant of the ancient Near East, referenced in the Gospel of John, when Nicodemus brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes to prepare the body of Jesus for burial. Research has found that aloe vera juice contains over 75 active compounds, including vitamins, minerals, enzymes, and polysaccharides that researchers have linked to improved digestive function, reduced inflammatory markers, and significant antioxidant activity throughout the body. 6. Fig juice. Figs were so embedded in the daily life of biblical Israel that they appeared not just as food, but as medicine, with the prophet Isaiah specifically instructing that a poultice of pressed figs be applied to King Hezekiah when he was gravely ill. Research has found that fig juice delivers a remarkable concentration of polyphenols, flavonoids, and natural enzymes, including phycin, that researchers have linked to improved digestive function, reduced inflammatory markers, and significant antioxidant activity across multiple published studies. 7. Cedarwood Tea. Modern research has identified cedarwood as containing cedral and alpha-cedrine, bioactive compounds that researchers have linked to significant anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial activity, with studies documenting its potential role in supporting respiratory health, reducing anxiety markers, and promoting healthy sleep patterns through its documented influence on the nervous system. 8. Hyssop tea. Hyssop appears throughout scripture in some of the most pivotal moments in all of biblical history. Hyssop contains pinocamphone, isopinocamphone, and a spectrum of flavonoids, including diosmin and hesperidin, that researchers have linked to significant antimicrobial, antiviral, and expectorant activity, with traditional medicine across the Middle East using hyssop tea for centuries to support respiratory health and digestive function. 9. Raw honey water. Honey mixed with water was one of the most widely consumed therapeutic drinks across the entire ancient Near East. A study published in the Asian Pacific Journal of Tropical Biomedicine documented raw honey's broad-spectrum antimicrobial properties against a wide range of bacterial strains, including some that have developed resistance to conventional pharmaceutical treatments. 10. Olive leaf tea. Modern research has identified oleuropein, the primary bioactive compound in olive leaves, as one of the most extensively studied natural compounds in all of nutritional medicine, with studies linking it to significant reductions in blood pressure, improved cardiovascular markers, and powerful antimicrobial activity against a broad spectrum of bacterial and viral strains. 11. Date palm juice. Date palm juice, extracted from the sap and pressed fruit of the date palm, was one of the most consumed and celebrated drinks across the ancient Near East. A broad spectrum of phenolic compounds in date palm extract that demonstrated remarkable antioxidant activity comparable to some of the most studied botanical extracts in modern nutritional research. 12. Mint tea. Mint was so valuable in first century Israel that Jesus rebuked the Pharisees directly for tithing their mint down to the last leaf while neglecting justice and mercy. Mint tea contains rosmarinic acid, menthol, and a spectrum of flavonoids that researchers have linked to significant improvements in digestive function, reduced inflammatory markers, and measurable antimicrobial activity against a range of documented bacterial strains. 13. Carob Drink. Carob was the survival drink of the biblical wilderness. Carob contains a unique class of polyphenols, including condensed tannins alongside an extraordinary fiber profile that researchers have linked to significant reductions in LDL cholesterol, improved blood sugar regulation, and measurable antioxidant activity throughout the body. A study published in the European Journal of Nutrition found that carob fiber demonstrated significant ability to reduce LDL cholesterol levels in clinical participants without any pharmaceutical intervention. 14. Frankincense Tea. Frankincense is one of the most recognizable substances in all of biblical history, brought by the Magi as one of only 3 gifts considered worthy of presentation to the newborn Jesus. Modern research has identified boswellic acids as the primary bioactive compounds in frankincense, and what laboratories have found in those compounds has generated some of the most significant excitement in natural medicine research in recent decades, with studies published in the journal Phytomedicine documenting frankincense extract's powerful ability to inhibit the production of leukotriene, inflammatory molecules that drive chronic inflammatory conditions throughout the body, with effects that researchers have compared favorably to conventional anti-inflammatory pharmaceutical compounds in both potency and consistency across multiple clinical trials. 15. Turmeric Milk. Turmeric milk sits at the intersection of the biblical spice trade and the daily therapeutic traditions of the ancient Near East in a way that makes it one of the most historically grounded and scientifically validated drinks on this entire list. Turmeric traveled the same ancient trade routes that passed directly through the Holy Land, connecting Israel to India, Persia, and Egypt. And the golden spice that arrived along those routes was incorporated into the food, drink, and medicine of biblical-era cultures with an intuitive understanding of its power that modern clinical research is now validating with a level of scientific rigor that it has made curcumin, the primary bioactive compound in turmeric, the subject of over 12,000 published scientific studies examining its biological effects across a remarkable range of health conditions. A study published in the journal Oncogene found that curcumin demonstrated anti-inflammatory activity that outperformed several commonly used pharmaceutical anti-inflammatory compounds in laboratory comparisons, a finding so significant that it redirected entire research programs and prompted a wave of clinical trials examining curcumin's potential across cardiovascular disease, neurological health, metabolic function, and cellular protection that continues to generate landmark findings every single year. What makes turmeric milk specifically so extraordinary beyond the curcumin content is the ancient intuition behind combining turmeric with fat, because the cultures that developed this drink understood through generations of observation that turmeric worked better when consumed with a fat-rich liquid. And modern pharmacological research has now confirmed exactly why, revealing that curcumin is fat-soluble and dramatically increases its bioavailability when consumed alongside healthy fats, meaning the ancient practice of mixing turmeric into warm milk was not tradition for its own sake, but an accidentally precise delivery mechanism that maximized the therapeutic potential of every single cup. A landmark study published in the American Journal of Cardiology found that curcumin supplementation was associated with reduced risk of heart attack in patients who had undergone coronary artery bypass surgery, and research published in the journal Psychopharmacology documented curcumin's significant influence on brain-derived neurotrophic factor levels, a protein critical for the growth and maintenance of neurons whose reduction has been linked to depression, cognitive decline, and neurodegenerative disease, making turmeric milk not just a cardiovascular and anti-inflammatory powerhouse, but one of the most neurologically supportive drinks ever identified in the natural world. The golden drink that the ancient spice roots delivered to the kitchens and healing traditions of the biblical world was not just warming and nourishing in the way that any hot milk drink feels warming and nourishing on a cold evening. It was delivering one of the most biologically active and clinically validated therapeutic compounds ever identified in a plant food directly into the bodies of the people who consumed it. And the fact that it tasted extraordinary while doing it is perhaps the most remarkable thing of all. 16. Red wine. If there is one drink that carries more biblical weight, more cultural significance, and more scientific controversy than almost anything else on this entire list, it is red wine. Modern research has delivered a verdict on red wine that is simultaneously validating and nuanced, with the resveratrol content of red wine generating some of the most intense scientific interest of any naturally occurring compound in the last 3 decades, and studies published in journals including Biochimica et Biophysica Acta, documenting resveratrol's remarkable range of documented biological effects, including support for cardiovascular health through its influence on arterial flexibility and platelet aggregation, significant anti-inflammatory activity through its inhibition of key inflammatory pathways, and documented neuroprotective effects that have prompted researchers studying Alzheimer's disease and cognitive decline to examine resveratrol as a potential therapeutic agent with a seriousness that would have seemed extraordinary even 20 years ago. A landmark study published in the New England Journal of Medicine examining the cardiovascular outcomes of thousands of participants following a Mediterranean diet found that moderate red wine consumption as part of that dietary pattern was associated with significantly reduced risk of major cardiovascular events. And researchers studying the French paradox, the phenomenon of relatively low cardiovascular disease rates in a population consuming a diet high in saturated fat, have consistently pointed to regular moderate red wine consumption as one of the primary explanatory factors behind that statistical anomaly, generating a body of epidemiological evidence that has fundamentally shaped the way cardiologists think about the relationship between diet, alcohol, and heart health. Beyond resveratrol, red wine delivers quercetin, anthocyanins, catechins, and a spectrum of polyphenolic compounds that work synergistically in ways that isolated supplement formulations have consistently struggled to replicate. And researchers studying the bioavailability of these compounds have found that the fermentation process itself transforms the polyphenol profile of grape juice in ways that actually enhance the therapeutic potential of several key compounds, suggesting that the ancient intuition behind fermenting grape juice, rather than simply pressing and drinking it fresh, was producing a biochemically superior therapeutic beverage that modern fermentation science is only now beginning to fully appreciate and understand. The cup that Jesus lifted at the Last Supper and called his blood was not chosen randomly or purely for symbolic convenience. It was the most studied, the most celebrated, and the most therapeutically complex fermented beverage in the entire ancient world. And 2,000 years later, the laboratories that have subjected it to the most rigorous scientific scrutiny ever applied to any dietary beverage have returned with a verdict that the ancient world would have recognized immediately: that this drink carries something extraordinary inside every single cup. 17. Apple cider vinegar drink. Apple cider vinegar mixed with water was consumed daily across the ancient biblical world. Research has validated every single one of those ancient instincts with clinical precision, with a landmark study published in Diabetes Care, finding that apple cider vinegar consumed before meals produced significant reductions in post-meal blood glucose and insulin levels in both healthy participants and those with documented insulin resistance, findings that have been replicated across multiple subsequent trials and have made apple cider vinegar one of the most studied natural metabolic support substances in modern nutritional science. Beyond blood sugar regulation, research has documented apple cider vinegar's significant antimicrobial properties, its role in supporting healthy cholesterol profiles, and the prebiotic potential of the raw, unfiltered variety containing the mother, a living colony of beneficial bacteria and enzymes that modern gut microbiome research is examining with increasing seriousness and sustained scientific interest. The soldiers who carried it to war, the farmers who drank it at harvest, and the wisdom writers who acknowledged its power in scripture were all pointing at the same thing that modern laboratories are now confirming: that this ancient drink is one of the most metabolically intelligent beverages ever consumed by human hands. 18. Pomegranate and Honey Elixir. This is the drink that stops researchers cold when they look at it as a combined formula rather than two separate ingredients, because the ancient world did not consume pomegranate and honey in isolation, but blended them together into a thick, sweet elixir that appeared at feasts, healing rituals, and sacred celebrations across the biblical Near East, with both ingredients independently celebrated in scripture and the combination representing one of the most antioxidant dense and antimicrobial powerful blends that modern nutritional science has ever had the opportunity to analyze in a clinical setting. Pomegranate delivers punicalagins and punicic acid, compounds so unique to this fruit that they are found almost nowhere else in the natural world, while raw honey contributes over 200 biologically active compounds, including hydrogen peroxide producing enzymes, methyl glyoxal, and a broad spectrum of polyphenols. And when researchers have examined the synergistic interaction between these two ingredient profiles, the results have been remarkable, with studies documenting combined antioxidant activity that significantly exceeds what either ingredient produces independently, a phenomenon researchers describe as synergistic potentiation, and one that suggests the ancient instinct to combine these two ingredients was not culinary preference alone, but something closer to intuitive pharmacological precision. A study published in the journal Food Chemistry examined the combined antimicrobial and antioxidant activity of pomegranate and honey formulations, and found results that outperformed each ingredient tested in isolation by a margin significant enough to prompt serious discussion in the research community about the therapeutic potential of traditional food combination practices that modern nutritional science has largely ignored in its rush to isolate and study single compounds. The feasts of ancient Israel, where pomegranate and honey appeared together on the same table, were not just celebrations of abundance. They were delivering one of the most biochemically sophisticated and clinically powerful therapeutic combinations the natural world has ever produced, and the people drinking it knew it worked long before any laboratory existed to explain why. 19. Olive oil and lemon drink. There is a morning drink that has been consumed across the Mediterranean and the broader biblical world for thousands of years that most people in the modern West have never seriously considered. A simple mixture of extra virgin olive oil and freshly squeezed lemon juice taken on an empty stomach at the start of the day. And the reason it has persisted across so many centuries and so many cultures without ever requiring a marketing campaign or a supplement label is the same reason that everything else on this list has persisted. Because the people who drank it felt what it did and passed that knowledge forward through generations of lived experience that no laboratory existed yet to validate, but that modern nutritional science is now confirming with a level of clinical detail that is genuinely extraordinary. Extra virgin olive oil delivers oleocanthal, oleuropein, and hydroxytyrosol, three of the most extensively studied anti-inflammatory and cardioprotective compounds in all of nutritional medicine, with oleocanthal alone generating a landmark publication in the journal Nature after researchers at the Monell Chemical Senses Center discovered that its biological mechanism for reducing inflammation was strikingly similar to ibuprofen, a finding that fundamentally changed the way the scientific community thinks about why Mediterranean populations consuming large amounts of olive oil consistently demonstrate lower rates of chronic inflammatory disease than populations eating any other dietary pattern on Earth. The lemon component of this ancient drink contributes far more than flavor, delivering hesperidin, eriocitrin, and a spectrum of flavonoids that researchers have linked to improved liver function, enhanced bile production, and significant antioxidant activity. And when consumed together with olive oil, the fat-soluble compounds in the oil dramatically enhance the bioavailability of the lemon's active ingredients, in the same way that fat enhances curcumin absorption in turmeric milk, meaning this ancient combination was accidentally creating a delivery mechanism that maximized the therapeutic potential of both ingredients simultaneously without anyone in the ancient world having the biochemical framework to understand exactly why it worked so consistently and so powerfully. A study published in the journal Nutrients found that the combination of olive oil polyphenols and citrus flavonoids produced synergistic effects on inflammatory markers and oxidative stress that exceeded what either ingredient demonstrated independently. And researchers studying liver health have documented olive oil and lemon juice consumption as one of the most effective natural strategies for supporting healthy bile flow and liver detoxification pathways. Findings that align precisely with centuries of traditional therapeutic use across the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and every culture that inherited the dietary wisdom of the biblical world. The Good Samaritan poured olive oil into the wounds of a stranger on the road to Jericho because the ancient world understood that olive oil healed, and the cultures that squeezed lemon into that same oil and drank it every morning on an empty stomach understood that the combination did something even more powerful than either ingredient alone. And 2,000 years later, the laboratories that have finally gotten around to testing that ancient intuition are finding that those morning drinkers along the shores of the ancient Mediterranean were, as usual, exactly right. Number 20. Raw garlic and water infusion. Save the absolute best for last, because this is the one that brings everything together. The drink that sits at the very top of this list, not because it is the most sophisticated or the most celebrated or the most poetically woven through the pages of scripture, but because when modern science lines up every natural substance ever identified in a botanical laboratory and asks which single ingredient has produced the most consistently extraordinary clinical findings across the widest range of documented health conditions, the answer keeps coming back to the same bulb that Egyptian pyramid builders ate every single morning, that the Israelites wept for by name after decades in the wilderness, and that Jesus walked past, growing in the fields of Galilee without ever needing a laboratory to tell him why the people around him had been reaching for it every single day for thousands of years. Garlic contains allicin, a sulfur compound released only when garlic is crushed or chopped, that begins to degrade within hours of exposure to heat, meaning the ancient instinct to consume garlic raw and fresh, rather than cooked, was accidentally preserving the single most therapeutically active compound in the entire plant. And there you have it, 20 biblical drinks that have been hiding in plain sight across thousands of years of human history. If this video opened your eyes, hit that like button right now because it tells YouTube this information matters and puts it in front of the people who need it most. And if you are not subscribed, yet hit that button and the bell right now, because every single week we go this deep into the intersection of biblical history, ancient wisdom, and modern science that most channels never bother to explore. Drop a comment below and tell me which drink on this list surprised you the most, whether you're already consuming any of them, or whether there is an ancient biblical drink you think deserves its own dedicated video, because those comments are the best part of this community, and every single one of them gets read. And if you know someone who loves biblical history, natural health, or both, share this video with them right now, because the best thing you can do for someone you care about is make sure they have access to information that the modern world buried a long time ago. We will see you in the next one.